Good morning, my dear students. All of you are most welcome in this morning session of English Literature. I am Dr. Naresh Agrawal going to represent a very beautiful essay, The Social Cause of Economic Globalization, written by Vandana Shiva. So let me start. Vandana Shiva, born in 1952, is a scholar of physics turned into social activist who is a fighter for the rights of women and environment. Are women and environment related to each other? It is easy to see that both the environment and women are violated by men, and we need to show how women and environment are treated by our society. Vandana Shiva actively participated in the Chipko movement of 1970s. She joined the group of people who circled around trees to prevent falling trees. She is one of the leaders of International Forum of Globalization and Alter Globalization movement. She is a recipient of several awards, including the Save of the World Award in 2009. Vandana Shiva is a renowned environmentalist. She is well known for her writings against globalization and in support of the Alter Globalization movement. She did her doctorate degree in quantum theory from the University of Western Ontario, Canada in 1978. Currently residing in Delhi, she has authored more than 20 books and published over 300 research papers in prominent scientific journals. She stepped into the world of social activism in 1970s with her participation in Chipko movement to prevent the fellings of trees. She founded an institute, the Research Foundation for Science, Technology and Ecology in Dehradun in 1982 to address the significant issues of the contemporary times. She founded VANDNA in 1991, a movement across India to protect the diversity of living sources, particularly native seed. It also aims at promoting organic farming and fair trade. In 2004, she started Biza Vidyapeeth, an international college for sustainable living in Doon Valley in collaboration with Shoemaker College, United Kingdom. Vandana Shiva has contributed greatly in changing the practice and standards of agriculture and food communism and consumerism. She has made visible the social, economic, and ecological costs of globalization led by corporates through her comprehensively researches works. So, dear students, now let me discuss the essay in detail. In the present essay, Vandana Shiva discusses various aspects, especially darker side of globalization. Before we continue, what is globalization? Though it is a complex topic, we can briefly say that globalization is the process of linking our national economy with the world economy. In other words, Indian economy will be linked with the economies of European and American states. Is it bad for all nations? If so, why do nations all over the world try to link with the global economy? In the 1990s, India also took part in the globalization process. How does it affect our nation? Are we beneficial by the process? Can we compare the situation of India before and after 1990s? These are the basic and primordial questions. In the first part of the essay, Vandana Shiva questions the claims of the people who support globalization. Supporters of globalization argue that the globalization brings nations all over the world together so that goods produced by one nation will be available in another country. This helps international cooperation. They also states the globalization provides equal opportunity to all nations to sell their products in another country's market. A globalized world is a global village where all nations can do business without any limitations. In other words, American, European countries can sell their goods without paying any import tax. In pre-1990 in India, foreign companies were forced to pay import tax to government. In a globalized world, no nation is allowed to tax other nation's product as all nations have equal opportunity on parts of the globe. Sounds good, doesn't it? This is one of the positive aspects of globalization emphasized by the supporters. However, the authoress exposes this argument by saying that the equal opportunity to unequal people is not equality. According to her, globalization is the rule of the greed. It legitimizes the exploitation of multinational companies. She also says that globalization is good for highly industrialized and developed nations who can get access to the markets of underdeveloped nations. Can Indian farmers who are uneducated, poor and helpless compete with American European companies? How can India and Indian farmers produce goods which are cheaper than multinational companies? It is to be noted that American European nations demand all nations to reduce taxes on their products so that they can amass large chunk of wealth out of poor nations. In this case, developed nations get the benefit of the globalization, whereas the poor nations get poorer. Vandna Shiva explains her point by presenting the situation of Indian farmers. She focuses on the rising number of the farmers who suffer hunger and malnutrition in India. It is to be noted that globalization promises of equal opportunity and development of all nations. But in the case of Indian farmers, they are getting poorer over the years. In order to substantiate her ideas, she compares per capita calories intake of Indian households. She quotes that per capita calorie intake has fallen from 1830 kcal in 1989 to 1600 kilocalorie kcal in 1998. In 1999-2000, almost 77% of the rural population consumed less than the required calorie intake of 2400 kilocalorie kcal means. It means kcal. Why does it happen? As India has linked itself with global economy, Indians must be able to get equal opportunities with Americans and Europeans. Indian citizens must be able to access quality services and goods that are accessible to Europeans and Americans. But what is the reality? Do villagers of India get international accredited quality goods and services? My basic question is this: do villagers of India get international accreditation quality goods and services? Do poor quality in India get high quality education, health services as that of Americans? These questions have to look deeper into the problem. The role of globalization in the agrarian crisis in India needs special attention, as Indian economy still depends on agriculture sector than any other nation in the world. How did globalization stimulate our agrarian crisis and led to farmers' suicide. Vandana Shiva points out at the increase of the cost of production. As a part of the modernization, highly costly machines are introduced to the international agriculture sector of India, with effect that farmers could not manage the rising cost of production. They were forced to depend on exploitation of banks for agriculture loans. As a part of the globalization process, all nations supposed to follow general agreement on affidavit and trade GATT imposed by WTO World Trade Organization. Because of GATT, tax on importing has been removed. As a result, cheaper products produced by foreign countries flood the market. This stimulated the falling price of farm produce. Farmers who produce crops with expensive machines found the cheaper imported products a challenge to their existence. The falling of price of farm products drives them to suicide. Following dictate of the WTO, India had weakened its public dispute system PDS. It is really painful situation that India has weakened its public distribution system PDS by her own hands. And the Essential Commodities Act, ECA. This made life unbearable for Indian farmers. The government of India followed a lot of regulations which made life of Indian farmers more tragic. Some of them are listed as below. First, liberalization of fertilizers imports and deregulation of the domestic manufacture. Second, removal of land ceiling regulation. Third, removal of subsidies on irrigation, electricity and credit. Fourth, dismantling of food security system. Fifth, abolition of the Essential Commodities Act. Actually, the issues of farmer suicide, hunger in the villages and suburbs, and malnutrition caught media attention, and people protested in the streets. The government was forced to act. In order to patch up the misgiving, it adopted a few regulations which, according to Vandana Shiva, added fuel to the fire. To address the high price of food grains, the government imported various food grains from other nations. It also implemented a few methods to grow food grains, especially wheat, ignoring the genuine problems of the farmers. The government introduced a few hybrids, genetically modified seed varieties, and asked farmers to replace the time-tested seed varieties they plant. These seeds were produced by multinational companies, MNCs, who prepared seed banks, and cooperation were given subsidies. What is this? It means the corporate sector related to that industry was going to flourish, knowingly or unknowingly. In addition to this, the government encouraged use of chemical fertilizers which risk the soil health. The government also allotted subsidy for micronutrients, gypsum and diesel. In the next part of the essay, Vandana Shiva suggests a few positive methods to stimulate the dreams of Indian farmers. She recommends the time-tested farmers seed varieties instead of the genetically modified seeds. She also prefers to use organic fertilizers and organic manure instead of chemical fertilizers. She also points at the need of the conserving the seed varieties. The last part of the essay deals with the cultural impact of globalization. She is aware that the globalization is not just an economic process, but it has deeper social, cultural, and political impact. She warns us that globalization will take away all kinds of cultural varieties and diversities across the globe. She also refers to the effect of artificial food grains on human body and culture. She feels that distorted proteins will infect human culture, and the infected cultures become self-infected agents. Globalization threatens diverse culture values, norms and practices of indigenous culture. The monoculture of MC Donald and Coca-Cola with monopolies of our cultures and gradually hate between cultures and negative idealities will be promoted. However, the main points of the essay that to be remembered. Vandana Shiva is a social activist and eco-feminist. She also criticizes the dark aspects of globalization. She questions the claims of supporters of globalization. She argues that farmers and rural villagers are paying the highest prices of globalization. Globalization widens the gap between the rich and the poor. Very touching scene, very touching. Globalization is responsible for farmer suicide, increase in incidents of hunger and malnutrition. The cost of farm production shoots up, whereas the price of farm products falls down. School of Distance Education. WTO insists on GATT. As a result, commodities are not distributed through PDS by government. Fertilizer import, removal of land ceiling regulations, etc. have worsened the situation of the farmers. The initiatives taken by the government to patch up the crisis are not effective. It has made life unbearable for farmers. Seed replacement and supporters through chemical fertilizers are not the right to remove. For a healthy world, time-tested seed varieties must be preserved. Use of organic fertilizers and the manure are to be encouraged. Genetically modified seeds and food grains will have cultural impacts. Cultures will be infected. Inequality and ethnic conflicts will be heightened. All cultural diversities will be replaced by the monocultures of MC Donald and Coca-Cola. My dear students, once again, the listener and the spectator or the audience, key points of the essay. Economic globalization was initially considered a rising tide that would raise all boats. Unfortunately, it turned out to be like tea tsunami for the poor and vulnerable in the third world. The impacts of economic globalization are different on different sections of the society, but the vulnerable are paying the highest price as they are paying with their very lives. Globalization and farmers' suicides. Farmers' suicides and malnutrition are the result of 10 years of rapid, unthinking trade liberalization. Globalization has led to increase in the cost of production, falling prices of farm produce and rising cost of food as a result of dismantling of the PDS system and weakening the Essential Commodities Act. The choice of both farmers and consumers decreases as global corporations increase their control over food and agriculture. These corporations gain by low commodity prices and people lose with rising costs of essential commodities. Grow more wheat, sustainability. The rising prices of wheat is projected as the result of low production and low productivity. It is feared that the policy of importing wheat will lead to production and crisis for food grains in future. The proposed package of grow more wheat is misleading. Seed replacement, that is replacing the tried and tested domestic varieties of seeds with hybrids and corporate seeds. However, the package will further increase cost of inputs and deplete soil health because it is based on chemical inputs, not organic inputs. Thus, seed replacement is not a solution but a source of new problem. If the proposed package has increased productivity by 25 to 40%, organic methods have increased productivity by 200%. Instead of subsidizing corporations for non-renewable seeds and non-renewable inputs, we need to support our small organic farmers to go organic. The peonization of culture, very good. That to be considered, that to be understood properly. Culture is a positive lived experience. However, the stresses and pressures of globalization change positive identities into negative identities. Much like the prions, the distorted proteins, which were identified as causing mad cow disease when cows were fed with carcasses of deceased cows. Just like prions, the prionized cultures become self-infecting agents in society. Culture and economy cannot be separated. The neoliberal ideology of the development and globalization washes away culture. Economic globalization has hijacked culture, reducing it to a consumerist monoculture of McDonald's and Coca-Cola on one hand and negative identities of hate on the poor. So it is concluded that the need of hour is to move our society to a paradigm which is beyond economic globalization. All my dear students, अब आप इसको एक बार चाहो तो मैं थोड़ा हिंदी में एक्सप्लेन करना 2 मिनट में एक्सप्लेन कर देता हूँ सारा का सारा। वंदना शिवा 1952 में इनका जन्म हुआ। ये फिजिक्स की बहुत बड़ी स्कॉलर थी और बाद में समाजवादी बन गई और ये इको फेमिनिस्ट हैं। इको फेमिनिस्ट वो महिला है जो महिला के राइट्स के लिए, अधिकारों के लिए और एनवायरनमेंट के राइट्स के लिए लड़ती रहती है। महिला और एनवायरनमेंट का एक रिलेशन है क्योंकि हर कोई आता और इनको प्रदूषित कर देता है, ये उसमें कोरिलेशन है। चिपको आंदोलन में इन्होंने 1970 में भाग लिया और इनको बहुत सारे अवार्ड्स भी मिले। 2009 में भी इनको सेव द वर्ल्ड के नाम से अवार्ड मिला, सेव द वर्ल्ड नाम से 2009 में। वंदना शिवा एनवायरनमेंटलिस्ट होने के साथ साथ इन्होंने ग्लोबलाइजेशन की जो थ्योरी थी उसको थोड़ा सा प्रोटेस्ट किया उस थ्योरी को, क्योंकि इसकी कमियां बताई। इसकी वास्तव में खास कमियां उन्होंने भारत के परिप्रेक्ष्य में बताई हैं और उन्होंने नवदन्या नाम से एक 1991 में मूवमेंट शुरू किया। 2004 में बीजा विद्यापीठ अंतर्राष्ट्रीय महाविद्यालय की स्थापना की यूनाइटेड किंगडम के कोलैबोरेशन से। इस ऐसे के अंदर काफ़ी सारी चीज़ें जो है वो मैं डिस्कस कर रहा हूँ। इन्होंने ग्लोबलाइजेशन के डार्क एस्पेक्ट को टच किया है। हमें ग्लोबलाइजेशन का मीनिंग समझना पड़ेगा शुरू करने से पहले। ये कॉम्प्लेक्स टॉपिक है। इसके अंदर एक प्रक्रिया है जब पूरे विश्व की इकोनॉमी एक साथ सरवाइव करना शुरू करती है। सभी नेशंस की इकोनॉमी उसके साथ सरवाइव करना शुरू करती है, पर ज़रूरी नहीं है कि सारे नेशंस सरवाइव कर पाएँ। इंडियन इकोनॉमी को आज यूरोपियन, अमेरिकन, उन बड़े विकसित देशों के साथ यहाँ का किसान, यहाँ का मज़दूर, यहाँ का छोटा सा उद्योग चलाने वाला, यहाँ के दस्तकार, हाथ का काम करने वाले लोग एक अमेरिका के और ब्रिटेन के रहने वाले लोगों से कैसा मुकाबला कर लेंगे। ग्लोबलाइजेशन के प्रोसेस से जो अमेरिका का किसान है, क्या वो भारतीय किसान उसकी तुलना, उसका मुकाबला कर पाएगा? यही बात इसके अंदर देखने को विशेष रूप से मिली। और कहा मैकडोनाल्ड और कोका कोला, इनका एक वर्चस्व स्थापित कर दिया ग्लोबलाइजेशन ने पूरी दुनिया में। एक हमारा छोटा सा भारतीय मजदूर, छोटा सा व्यापारी, छोटा सा उद्योगपति, छोटा सा कुशल कारीगर, क्या वो अमेरिका के कुशल कारीगर से, अमेरिका के व्यापारी से, अमेरिका के किसान से बराबरी कर पाएगा? तो यहाँ कुछ रिलैक्सेशन दिया जाना चाहिए था भारतीय किसानों को, भारतीय मजदूरों को, भारतीय कमियागारों को, भारतीय कुशल उद्यमों को, इंडस्ट्रियलिस्ट व्यापारियों को, वो नहीं दिया गया। इस बात को उन्होंने बहुत विशेष रूप से अपनी पीड़ा जाहिर की है। और थोड़ा WTO को भी उन्होंने GATT, इस प्रकार का जर्नल एग्रीमेंट ऑन एफिडेविट एंड ट्रेड, इस प्रकार का जो एक नया वर्चस्व स्थापित करने की कोशिश की। ये सब WTO का वर्क था, उनकी सूझबूझ थी ये कि भारतीय अर्थव्यवस्था को और कैसे कमज़ोर कर दें। और ये जो फर्टिलाइजर्स है उसका लिबरलाइजेशन और डीरेगुलेशन ऑफ डोमेस्टिक मैन्युफैक्चर, डीरेगुलेशन कर देना। क्यों रेगुलेशन किया जाना चाहिए था, डीरेगुलेशन कर दिया। घरेलू जो सकल उत्पाद हैं, छोटे मोटे मैन्युफैक्चरिंग, जो सीलिंग लैंड सीलिंग एक्ट है उसका रिमूवल ऑफ लैंड सीलिंग रेगुलेशन, और जो सहायता मिलनी चाहिए थी उसका रिमूवल, इरिगेशन, इलेक्ट्रिसिटी क्रेडिट उनके ऊपर, फूड सिक्योरिटी को ख़त्म कर दिया, एवोल्यूशन ऑफ एसेंशियल कमोडिटीज़ एक्ट। तो ये सब बातों को इन्होंने बहुत ही बारीकी से यहाँ पर लेखिका ने उठाया है और बहुत अच्छा है। हम सब मिलकर भी इस दिशा में सोचें। प्रिय विद्यार्थियों, इसी के साथ आप, मुझे पूर्ण विश्वास है, ध्यानपूर्वक सुनेंगे। जय हिंद, जय भारत।